Now, on Thursday, a group of 12 Jewish Democratic lawmakers criticised Ilhan Omar over a tweet where she equated the actions of America and Israel with terrorist groups Hamas and the Taliban. Joining us now from New York is Outsider's favourite documentary filmmaker, Ami Horowitz. Ami, a small number of Jewish Democrats are asking Ilhan Omar to clarify her comments, but are they still confused about the squad's attitude to Israel, the only Jewish state in the world?
I mean, Ilhan Omar, part-time congresswoman, full-time anti-Semite, is at it again. And yeah, look, we're used to her comments, so I don't want to belabor the comments themselves. Of course she's anti-Semitic. It's not the first time she's done it. She's done it over and over and over again. When somebody tells you something, believe it. But what's most interesting is the reaction to her comments. So like you said, 12 Democratic congresspeople, and by the way, that's only half of the Democratic delegation and the Democratic Party, signed a letter which was kind of weak, to be honest with you, where they asked to clarify the comments. What need is there to clarify the comments? And then you had a reaction by the Democratic leadership, which was total weak tea. And I find that so incredibly upsetting. Look, when the Republicans had a guy like Steve King, who made racist comments, he was drummed out. He was primaried, and the Republican establishment got rid of him. When Marjorie Taylor Greene made her insane Jewish laser comments, the entire Republican establishment gave a full-throated condemnation of her comments. Yet Ilhan Omar, who sits, by the way, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, okay? The Foreign Affairs Committee of Congress makes her comments. They can't really condemn her. And by the way, and not to get lost in this, because there has been enough talk about it, she also put the United States and compared the United States to terrorists as well. So let's not lose sight of that as well. And of course, her response, which, oh God, it was amazing, was when you call out anti-Semitism, you're being Islamophobic, which by my math means that she is saying that anybody who's Islamic is anti-Semite, right? And then she went on to say that Islamic women of color have no free speech in Congress as she tweets it out to her millions of followers. By the way, Ilhan, you know where women, Muslim of color, have no free speech? Any Islamic country. And then, of course, you had the media response. The New York Times, the paper of record, went on to talk about this thing as the Republicans pounce. The Republicans always pounce. And because they want to cover for Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is the insanity of the world that we're living in, people.
Oh, James.
Well, I want to ask, it's not just this anti-Semitism on the left here. I also want to talk about what has been going on down there with Kamala Harris and the border and her trip. I understand that she took a trip to Guatemala and things didn't go too well for her down there. In fact, it seemed like it was a bit of the old Yankee go home when she wound up over there. What's happened and what's going on with her sudden change of heart where she's sounding a bit Trumpian on the subject of the southern border and just who should be allowed to come to America?
Yeah, there's no change. Look, this woman has always been an opportunist when it came to politics. That's how she became what she is. I don't want to go into her sordid history of how she moved up the ladder, but this is Kamala Harris writ large. Look, she has been put as she was given a job, right? The border czar. She hasn't visited the border. She went to the Guatemalan border. I don't understand what's happening here. Look, this whole, just to be clear, that we have the largest amount of people entering illegally in the last 20 years in 2021. What's changed? I wonder. But she won't go down to the border because she doesn't want to be faced with her failures right in front of her. She'll go down there and she will be met with a hostile response by congresspeople and citizens who live along the border. The reason why President Trump was so successful in border policy was very simple. He created what they call a Remain in Mexico policy, which means, and by the way, I'm sure people don't know, but when people cross the border, they're not sent back. They're actually taken, they're given like a citation, then they're been let into the interior of America to come back at their own time for a hearing. That's what they're actually done. That was the policy before Trump. Trump said, we're not doing this. It's a Remain in Mexico program where you will not be let into the interior of America. You will have to stay in Mexico. And of course, Joe Biden reversed the most obvious immigration policy, border policy you could imagine.
Caleb?
You're right, Ami. Kamala has been so weak on this stuff and all this, I'm going to go to the border sometime, and then she cackles for 5 minutes as she does. But I just want to go back to Ilhan Omar's comments. I think the most concerning thing here is that she's actually said out loud what a lot of people in America are thinking and have been emboldened by this conflict between Israel and Palestine recently. This anti-Semitism is on the rise. Is that right?
Yeah, she's saying the quiet part out loud. What you've seen in the Democratic Party mirrors what you saw with the Labour Party in Britain when Corbyn took over. The Corbynization of the Labour Party, which essentially entrenched it in deep anti-Israel, anti-Semitic policies and frankly, speech. And what you're seeing now is a part of the Democratic Party going full Corbyn, going full anti-Semite. But the problem is that you see the tide is turning against the normal Democrats. And the truth, and that's why you don't see them have this full-throated condemnation, because they're scared of the repercussions within their own party. Look, half of the Congressional Black Caucus has met with the virulently anti-Semitic, anti-American Louis Farrakhan. So this is a problem becoming much larger within the party, and that's why you don't see these guys speak up. You don't see Chuck Schumer, who's supposedly a proud Jew and proudly pro-Israel, kept his mouth quiet. Every time he saw the Democrats condemn Israel, he kept his mouth quiet. He kept himself quiet. And that's shocking and is disturbing, and it does not bode well for the party, not at all.
Now, Ami, we have seen this rise of left-wing anti-Semitism, but yet in America and other places around the world, the Jewish community overwhelmingly supports the leftist parties. The Democrats get the bulk of the Jewish vote in America, certainly not the Orthodox Jewish vote, but is that something that you see shifting anytime soon?
Yeah, it is profound sadness within me that that is the case. Yeah, the vast majority of Jews, usually around 80%, vote Democrat and vote for liberal candidates. It's shifting a little bit. Actually, Donald Trump took a little more of the Jewish vote than previous and also the previous Republican presidents running. I mean, I think he got the biggest share of the vote since Reagan. It's shifting a little bit because the reality is, while unfortunately, and I hate to say it, Israel does not rank and has not ranked as a top 10 issue for Jews in decades, literally decades. But anti-Semitism still rings as an issue that they care about because it really affects them personally. They couldn't care less about Israel, unfortunately. So yeah, it has started to shift a little bit, but unfortunately, I think they look and as Ilhan Omar and they look at Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the squad and say, they make excuses for it. Just a small minority voice within the larger Democratic Party. They refuse to cope with the reality that this is becoming the most powerful part of the Democratic Party. So look, if there's any silver lining, I would like to think that Jews will now move at least a little bit more to the Republican side, but I wouldn't hold out hope, unfortunately.
But in the Democratic Party, though, I'm wondering, everybody who's a Democrat or who voted for Joe Biden last time around, all 81 million of them, they can't all of them be on board with this hard left, radically progressive, anti-Semitic agenda, can they? I mean, I'm just thinking of some data points here. You know, AOC has been unable to move the needle, I think, in the New York City mayoral race, the contest for who's going to succeed de Blasio. Joe Manchin in West Virginia is becoming an increasingly powerful power broker. Most Democrats don't want to change the filibuster. And I saw that a town in Texas, which is in a heavily Hispanic, heavily Democratic part of Texas, they elected a Republican mayor. So is there going to be an earthquake coming where the Democrat Party has a civil war for its own soul between the far left, hard left, urban progressive radicals and its ordinary working class base who, if they aren't catered for, will just come back running to the Republicans in 2024 and in the next midterm elections next year.
Yeah, I think you will see that. And look, the other what you didn't mention was the issue of crime. I think most most Democrats look at the incredible rise in crime in the urban areas around America, particularly in New York and Chicago and Minneapolis and all the places where you saw the defund the police movement become strong. And you see this rise in crime, and crime is something which hits every single person, doesn't care what party you are, doesn't care who you voted for. And yeah, I think you are seeing Democrats saying, I didn't really sign up for this. I signed up for Joe Biden, who I remember from the 80s and the 90s, in the 70s and the 60s and the 20s and the 10s, when he was sentient, that he was a mainstream. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's right. Left of center Democrat. I think they're shocked by, a lot of them are shocked to see it. A lot of them refuse to believe it. That's the other thing, is that, yeah, they don't like seeing what's happening, but a lot of them will take these data points and they'll carve them up and slice them up to make an excuse and say, no, this is not Democratic policies. This is not Joe Biden policies. This is just some kind of weird trend. The New York Times always makes excuse about the rise in crime and saying it's because of coronavirus. Really, that's the New York Times excuse for crime, the rise in crime in America. So I hope you're right. I'm not sure you're right, but we will see sooner rather than later what actually will end up being the case.
Ami Horowitz, we always love having you on this program. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.